Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode in the Students' Union's Question Time. I'm Sharif, and I'm talking to a candidate today running for the position of the Athletics Union President. Today, I'm here with Corelli. Thanks for joining us, I suppose, me and the people who are watching this at home. The structure today is very straightforward. I've got a collection of questions for the candidate, and I'm going to ask them in just a minute. First of all, the candidate has chance for a 30-second opening statement to outline her policy positions. Are there any questions before we start, Corelli? Everything good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's fine.
I'm going to be keeping time. When I give you this warning, that means you have 10 seconds left. Okay? Brilliant.
Yes.
When you're ready, go for it.
Okay, so it's the usual stuff about AU president, but the AU has been the best part of my LSE career by far. It's been the only opportunity I think LSE has given me to grow and encourage me to develop skills and confidence and friendships. And as AU president, I just want to encourage as many people as possible and enable as many people as possible to have the same experience that I've had and improve my experience like that. And I want to do this mainly through culture setting, through the executive members of clubs downwards. That's pretty much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Corelli. Since we just have one candidate here at Question Time, what will happen is I'm just going to ask a series of questions. Corelli, if you can give your answer as short as possible, but I won't be strict with the sort of the 30-second timing.
Yeah, sure.
I may usher you to try and wrap up if you were going on for too long. Don't worry about giving long answers to these. Okay? Sure. So the first question is, how will you work with the wider AU? You've just mentioned in your speech that you want to work with the lower rungs of the ladder, but could you outline how you'll work with, say, the AU execs, the engagement officer, and club execs, how you envision your role will play out?
Yeah, so with that, I want to firstly just make sure my communications are really clear with them, make sure they know that I am sort of the leader in terms of I'll be setting who does what, but I'm mainly one of them. I want to support them as much as I want to lead them and help them to get things done. And I think mostly I would say I'm not that much above them in any way. I'm more there to support and help with anything that they need or anything that they'd feel that they want me to do. I'll listen to them first and then move from there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was a very good answer. If you can try and keep it in very short segments, that's going to be easy for the
Sure.
listeners and the watchers at home as well. So how you talked about how the AU's given you a great opportunity to grow, and it's been one of the best things, if not the best thing that's happened to you at LSD. Could you talk a little bit about, what your experience of AU culture has been, and if there are areas for improvement that you would like to focus on during your term if you were elected?
Yeah, so I've been a member of the netball club for 3 years. That's one of the biggest female clubs on campus. I was the social secretary for them this year, so I've been a member of the exec. I know what goes on there. As a big club, I think it does what it does fantastically, but it can be very stuck in the same kind of repeated rhythm socially and in terms of what they do with training. And I think people need to realize that you don't need to do what happened last year or the year before for it to be good. Things can move and evolve. I've also been a member of the horse riding team, and as a member of a much smaller club as well, it's a very different side to the AU. And as AU president, I want to kind of bring out these smaller clubs and do more inter-club things and bring them together, rather than, I think a lot of the time smaller clubs are sort of pushed to the wayside a little bit in terms of priorities for funding or socials or organisational structures, that kind of thing.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm just going to follow up on that since we're in a bit more of a free-flowing discussion.
Yeah, sure.
So you said that you like to move beyond things and see that the same old rhythms, say the Wednesday night zoos and the various events that happen are quite big on the AU calendar. You think that things can evolve and move forward. Are there any particular events or new initiatives that you'd like to see introduced to the calendar?
I think in terms of the social calendar, I think it needs a restructuring in terms of time. So I think I often find just practically in Lent term, there's a lot of expensive events clustered very close together. I think they can be spread out. So for example, date night or an equivalent event to date night can be moved to Michaelmas term. I think the funding could be spread out between them so that one expensive event is made less expensive by being subsidised by another ticket, things like that. I'd also want to extend it to this year, rowing, we're going to host a sort of fitness challenge social which obviously got cancelled because of COVID-19 issue, but I'd want to encourage more social like that into club competition and sort of bringing clubs together that isn't just getting drunk at zoo on a Wednesday.
Okay, that's brilliant. So you mentioned, say, date night and the ball, etc., that happened in Leinster. Do you think, do you have any ideas for specific events that you would like to see put on, or or is this something that you don't think is in the purview of the AU president necessarily?
I haven't thought of specific events as such, but I have thought that date night either needs to be moved or completely changed around. I think it's been good while it's lasted, but I do think it may have seen its day, and we could do a similar kind of show type event that isn't quite, because it does get very repetitive year after year, and although it can be good if you know the people, sometimes it's not as entertaining, and also it's relatively expensive, and I just think it could be improved and brought into sort of 2020.
Okay, brilliant. Moving slightly away from the social scene, specifically the AU, there's a bit of a gap in terms of what AU clubs do in their social lives and what societies as a whole and the rest of the LSE groups do. Do you think this is necessarily a problem or not, or is there something to be done about it if it is a problem?
I think it's not necessarily the worst problem in the world, but it's not a bad thing to encourage sort of outreach and association with other groups. So I know from my experiences in netball, we have tournaments with, say, interfaith groups and things like that. And I think it would definitely not be a negative thing to encourage other execs to kind of host the same kind of things, so that the AU aren't seen as this kind of separate entity to other areas of the SU, because we want to be just as involved as everyone else.
Brilliant. Okay. So how do you see your role in working with other part-time officers at the LSE Students' Union in terms of collaborative initiatives? For example, I know that the consent training that happened about 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, was, did a lot of work in tandem with the AU, and most recently as well, there's been some sustainability initiatives. I'm thinking of, for example, the male rugby cups at Tons. What are things that you can do in collaboration with other part-time officers at the LSE Students' Union in your role if you were elected? What would you prioritize?
So I think something that's very important to me is the recent movement, the hands-off movement. And I've heard that Laura does want to carry this on to next year, and I would make this a big priority for myself. I'd want to, as I said, through exec trainings, I think it's about changing a culture, and I think that starts with what the exec reflect and represent, and I'd probably make it mandatory for at least one member of exec to go to these kind of trainings or workshops or events that Hands Off put on, so that this kind of displays to the rest of their club, like, this is the behaviour that we expect, this is the kind of thing that we are like active in being involved in.
If I can ask a follow-up to that one, so the consent training and the movement on Hands Up LSE that LS put on are great initiatives on their own. Do you think that there are more, and these are big, good macro things to do, especially if you have people in leadership positions doing that, do you think that there is more to do for, say, team captains or on the more micro level to change the culture? What would you do to impress upon people at lower levels that, some activities should not be encouraged, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, it's an interesting question. So I think as AU president, the way you can make a difference is through the power kind of reaches the executive positions and maybe the captains, and then you kind of rely on them to trickle it down. But what I would suggest is making clubs, so the execs have the training, which therefore makes the club accountable for actions within their teams, so that then this makes, when someone, say, is out of line in a club or says something wrong or etc., this kind of reflects on the whole club, so people feel responsible in representing their clubs in what they do, and then this should therefore reflect on the exec and back to the AU in changing the culture around consent.
Okay, that sounds like a great plan, actually. It's brilliant. Could I ask, so you mentioned a little bit briefly about your role in the netball team. Could you talk about your leadership experiences, your student leadership experiences at LSE, and how that makes you, well suited for this role?
Yeah, so I was social secretary of netball all year, so this means I was heavily involved in organising socials every week, knowing what was going on, keeping people updated and communicating information with people on tickets, like issues, refunds, everything like that. So it's just about being on the ball all the time, keeping people communicated, making sure people are clear on what's going on. Also in event planning and organising and executing things, I've had a lot of practice in that, as well as being social sec of netball. I'm a supervisor at the bar in Tun, so I've also worked at many of the AU events and run the event as a bar supervisor. So I really understand how to run those kind of events from an events management point of view, and I've worked closely with the SU events management to host AU and non-AU events. I'd also say being social sec of netball helped me understand being in a leadership team and how that kind of dynamic works with the club captain, vice captain, social sec, and how you not necessarily just conform to one role, you sort of work as a team.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Curly. Just the final question now for you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sum up your campaign in one phrase. So not the slogan you're running with, but a phrase that best sums up your position, your policies, and why you're the best candidate. What would that phrase be? You can have a bit of time to think about this, of course. When you're ready, you can just say it.
Sure. I'd say that I'm just an approachable and an open individual with a genuine priority and a genuine care for the AU and all its members. That's what I'd call myself.
Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Carly, for joining us. I appreciate there's a lot of stressful things out there in the world right now, so thanks for taking the time out for this.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Thank you, everyone watching at home. Best of luck to the candidate, and good luck with everything. Yes.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.